So good afternoon. It's 12 o'clock on Tuesday, June 25th, and I'm calling to order the Athens City Planning Commission meeting. This is a date that we added because we were not able to meet a couple of times here in June. So the first order of business is establishing a quorum, and as I look to my left and right, we have 4 of the 5 commission members here, and so we do have a quorum. Austin Phillips is our member who was not able to make it or is not able to make it today. So with that, we will proceed. The next order is to administer the oath for anybody who would like to speak, and we have a fairly large audience today, so I would ask that anybody who is going to speak or thinks they might speak, raise your right hand, and I ask that you to affirm that anything you will say and present today, to the best of your knowledge, will be true and accurate. So if you are willing to do that, say aye or yes. Thank you. Okay. We have the last time we met was May 15th. Everybody here in the commission ought to have the minutes from that meeting, and I would like to, if I can receive a motion to approve them and accept them, and put them in the record. Now, maybe several of us weren't here. Just one, just the. Okay. So, if so. First of all, has everybody had a chance to take a look at the minutes? And if so, no corrections or additions that anybody sees? Perfect. So like I said, I'll entertain a motion to accept these minutes of May 5th. Accept the minutes. 15th in a second. Okay. All in favor of those, say aye. 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 Abstain. Okay, so now we're going to move into cases. We don't have any cases today. We have several items, though, on the agenda for communications. The first one is a presentation by Mr. Cozart from Ohio University Facilities Management and Safety. Sir, if you would come forward and you can proceed with your presentation. Thank you.
And good afternoon. Thank you all for the opportunity to come today and to spend a few minutes updating you on a project, a very exciting project that we've just started construction on Ohio University's campus here in Athens. For those of you who don't know me, I'm John Cozat. I'm the Associate Vice President of Design and Construction at OU. So today I plan to spend a couple of moments giving you an overview of the project, sharing with you some of the drivers that we established as we designed the project to ensure that we were meeting the needs of our students today. I have several renderings I want to share with you to show you how the design has developed and what the facility will look like when it's completed. And then I also want to talk a little bit about our nonconformance with the zoning ordinance in the R3 neighborhood in which we're building this property. So I'll spend just 5 or 10 minutes giving you an overview. Please feel free to interrupt, ask any questions. I'd be happy to answer any along the way. So starting off, just to give you an overview of the project, this is a new residence hall being built on South Green, just behind the front floor, which I know many of you are familiar with those facilities. It's a 591-bed residence hall. It's about 165,000 square feet and 5 stories. It will be built, as many of you know, this is in the FEMA designated 1% flood zone. So we have taken that into account in our design. We're building the site up out of the flood zone. So the first floor that will be occupied is 642 feet above sea level, which is about 1.8 feet above the 1% flood elevation. So that has been taken into account in our design. Just to give you a bit of an overview of the site, on the screen you'll see those front 4 buildings in Nelson Hall along the top, and then just to the east, but on the screen just below the buildings, Pickering, Brown, and McKinnon, you'll see the new proposed residence hall. So this is one building. Although on this plan it might look like it's 3 buildings, they are all connected. It has one address, and it has one fire alarm system, and it is being treated as one facility. We have coordinated the design of this building with all of the emergency services within Athens, and as I mentioned, we've just started construction back in early May with some of the deep foundation and site work. So to give you a bit of an overview of the things that really drove us as we were designing this project, the focus was on creating a modern, flexible, active environment that met the needs of our students today. So a big part of our design process was engaging the student body to hear what was important to them. And one of the themes that rang true throughout the design process was health, wellness, activity, and connection to the outdoors. So I think as we look at these renderings, you'll see how we've incorporated several of those elements into the design of this building, including the siting of the building, which is, as I mentioned, there on South Green with the adjacency to the bike path, as well as to the Hocking River. So I'll spend a couple of minutes just going through a few renderings. So this is one of my favorite shots of the building, rendered kind of from above. So you can see the size, scale of the building and how it relates to the existing facilities there in the front four. Many of you probably remember the back south buildings that previously occupied this area. So as you know, starting in 2016, we started taking several of those buildings offline because of their deferred maintenance and the condition of those facilities, as well as their inability to meet the program needs of today's students. So we have taken several of those buildings offline. That made the space for the construction of this new facility. This is a view from the east. So the Hocking River would be to my back as I'm looking at this view. So as I mentioned, the connection to the outdoors was an important part of the design process for our students. And you can see how we've very intentionally designed this kind of back door of the residence hall to provide that connectivity to the river, to the bike path, to the recreation fields that are on this part of campus, as well as to the green space that we've worked really hard to preserve through the design process as well. Which is a good transition into our nonconformance with the zoning. So this is an R3 zoned area in the city. And as you know, the maximum allowable height for a facility to be built in that area is 2.5 stories or 35 feet. I outlined in the cover letter that I shared with you that our building as designed is 5 stories and about 69 feet tall. So it is above the allowable height limit. A couple of reasons why we made that decision to go higher and occupy a smaller overall square footage on the site was to retain that green space that is so valuable here in the city of Athens as well as on our campus. So we worked hard to preserve the green space, to preserve the recreation space for the students and for the community. We also worked hard to minimize the amount of impervious surfaces, which helps with water quality and water volume runoff as well. And the other compelling factor, which is displayed here on the screen and in the materials I shared with you, is although it's non-conforming with the zoning ordinance in the area, it does conform to the height of the adjacent buildings. Some of those are university-owned buildings, but many of them are privately owned buildings. So if you look at the highest peak elevation on this building we've designed is 711.25 feet. And the adjacent apartment buildings, the top of the highest occupied floor is 710. And that does not include the mechanical penthouse. So you'll see that it fits the context of the neighborhood and the area as well in terms of the height and scale of the building. That summarizes what I wanted to share with you today, but I would be more than happy to answer any questions anybody has about this facility, about our intent, the program of the facility, or our intent to invoke the government property exemption clause within the zoning ordinance.
Does this, thank you very much for your presentation thus far.
Thank you.
Does this replace the number of beds that were taken down, or is it increasing the number of beds on, based on, the buildings that were removed from that area?
It isn't a factor in the buildings that have been removed. So the buildings that were removed to date represented contraction in our program and what we needed for bed space on campus based on our enrollment trends. This is really thought more of a replacement of future beds that are anticipated to come offline. So there are 5 back south buildings that still remain. Those buildings are in poor condition, and we do intend to remove those facilities from our portfolio in the relatively near future, likely in the 2030 to 2031 timeframe. So these beds will provide us capacity to enable major renovations of some existing residence halls, and then ultimately removal of the remainder of those back south buildings.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Question about the design, and you said that it is in the flood plain.
It is.
And so if you could explain, I know there are several levels of the flood areas surrounding the rivers, so if you could explain to us in layperson's terms.
Sure.
That, and then also what kind of accommodations you have made aside from, I know some places have had underground parking or flow-through underground parking, and if any of that's being done.
Sure, yeah, happy to. So this graphic that I have on the screen is on the last slide of the materials that I shared with you. There's a dotted blue line that you can see below that first floor of the building. That represents what the current 1% flood elevation in that area is, which is 640.2 feet. So we did set the first occupied floor 1.8 feet above that at 642. That was not accomplished by adding parking beneath the building. It was accomplished by building the elevation of the site up. So if you drive by this site right now, you'll see we're actively importing material to raise the elevation of the site. So we're raising the ground about 10 feet to build the building on top of the ground. There are, and I should have provided this as part of my previous comments, but there are two spaces that are actually below that 1% flood elevation. One of them is a mechanical room, and that mechanical room has been designed to be flood-proof, so dry flood-proofed. We don't anticipate we'll have any issues with water in that area. And there is also an occupiable multi-purpose space. The multi-purpose space is really intended to provide support functions for the recreation space on that part of campus. So there are several single-user restrooms in that space, as well as kind of an open community meeting room type of space. So that space has been designed for flow-through flood construction. So in the event of a flood at that elevation, it would be able to flow through that space, and it's been designed to meet all those building code and associated requirements.
Okay, thank you.
That, Mr. Chair. We know that the current FIS flood insurance study is going to be modified this September. That elevation will change at this site. So we've asked, we had the engineer and architects that were looking at that, look at both of those base flood elevations, 1% as he's talking about, and it meets the requirements for both the existing FIS and that new proposed FIS that will become effective this fall. So we looked at both of those, and it still meets all the requirements for that. In addition, we talked to the architect and engineer about making sure that the fill that they're putting in is compacted correctly as is required by FEMA regulations. And they also did some checks to make sure that things like the elevator shaft, the bottom of the elevator shaft, is not going to have a problem with buoyancy if in the event of a flood. So they did a lot of extra work to make sure that this meets all the requirements of FEMA.
Thank you for that.
Are there, so you are not adding any parking? In fact, you may have taken some away, right, with the site you're using?
We are. We're actually removing about 180 parking spaces, surface parking spaces. Now, we do intend to bring some of that surface parking back into this part of campus in the future. Although it's not intended as part of this project, we're considering options for additional surface parking spaces. And we'll treat that as a separate project. And any associated water quality issues, best management practices will be taken into account in the design of that parking lot.
Anybody else have anything to add or ask?
You know, your question about whether this was a zero-sum game with units based upon those that are being taken offline was the my only question, and you answered that. That's great.
Thank you.
And I would make one comment, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, John, the R3 height requirement is actually 3.5 or lower. I think you said 2.5, so it's not as deficient as you said, actually. But to remind the commission, we recently passed a case where we recommended City Council to change our bulk controls to actually 4.5 in the R3. So even though it still wouldn't be, it would be closer to actually conforming based on our new bulk controls, because we all recognize that we need density in Athens, and height allows us to provide for some density.
Thank you for that
Yes.
clarification.
You have another comment?
Just that I appreciate the update. I really do. You know, and as a reminder to everybody, this is state lands, state properties. So by statute, you're basically required to just let us know what's going on, and I appreciate the work that you've done in working with David Riggs on this project, because we have seen other projects where unfortunately there was some missteps along the way with utilities underground. So again, I really appreciate the diligence that you put into working on this and to come before this body and give us an update.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
So the next item on the agenda, that was basically this too, right?
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I
That's
thought,
right.
okay. So the next item on the agenda is the proposed lot split on Lavelle Road. And so, would you like to make a presentation first?
I'll take a shot at it. Yes, Mr. Chair,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay.
So the Planning Commission is tasked with any kind of a lot split or subdivision to provide review and approval of those, whether it's we've broken that into two sections, a minor subdivision or a lot split, and then there's a major subdivision section. So we have regulations that require that determine what we can do for minor subdivisions and other ones for major. You don't see the minor subdivisions as they're done at the staff level. When a subdivision comes in, we look to see whether it meets the requirements of a minor subdivision or a major subdivision, and that is found in section 21.0307. It says a proposal that has any of the following automatically kicks in a major subdivision. Well, in section B of that, it says a creation, widening, or extension of a street or access easement. And that's what we have here, where we have an access easement which automatically kicks this subdivision into a major subdivision form. And that's why it comes to the board for Planning Commission for review. So of course, this doesn't meet the requirements of a major subdivision. And looking at this, because it's outside of the city corporate limits, because it's large lots, and we're looking at maybe having the board look at variances and exception waivers to the major subdivision requirements. So section 210203 of the code says that the Planning Commission is allowed to recommend variances for a major subdivision, and I'd suggest that you could ask to treat this as a minor subdivision as far as the rules and regulations go, so that you wouldn't require a public road built to city standards, and go ahead and make a recommendation to approve this to City Council. So the board would make recommendations here, and would go on to City Council for final approval. And that's what we're looking at here.
Anybody have any question of Mr. Riggs?
Can you remind us, this is outside of the city limit, but within the 3-mile boundary?
That's correct, yeah. The state of Ohio allows the municipalities to have jurisdiction over townships and counties for subdivisions where there's a possibility that we could annex that in the future. So we want to see these subdivisions and lot splits as they come in, because there may be a potential for us to annex those, and we wouldn't want to have an issue that would cause us problems in the future if we were to annex those properties. And that's the reason that we're looking at this today.
Any other? Okay, so then I would open it up to Mr. Chamberlain to present what he hopes to accomplish there on off of Lavelle.
Make a Macintosh work. I own a 23-acre parcel on Lavelle Road, and my intention in applying for this variance is, just as David just mentioned, is to be allowed to split this one large parcel into 3 parcels, only one of which would have the required road frontage. The other 2 would be essentially be landlocked, which the minor subdivision regulations don't allow. And that's what kind of kicks it over to the major subdivision thing. There would be 3 parcels all told. You can see them here. There would be a shared driveway then that would allow, and an easement, associated easement that would allow access to the property on the tract A on the left and tract C on the right. Tract B would in fact own the driveway and would own the road frontage on Lavelle Road, which is right there. I'm in the real estate business and I'm familiar with shared driveway easements, and I understand they can be complicated, but I would work carefully to not only put the road in myself, the driveway, but to also have, the proper framework for that shared maintenance that would benefit all 3 owners. I would be the person responsible also for bringing the driveway in, building it up, and also bringing in utilities to the site. So it's a split with 3 parcels. I'm asking for a variance because I think this is the thing that makes the most sense. But when I first came to this project, I was not going to ask for a variance, and I was just going to do it kind of more by the book. And this visual provides a kind of a glimpse at that method. This would allow it to be split. There's also an additional piece that's to the left of where it says 139. That's a 3-acre piece right there, so it would also include that. So the total tract now would be about 28 acres, and each piece would have its own road frontage. So tract B, road frontage to the bottom. The tract A, road frontage also, the tract in the back also has road frontage. And then tract D. So it'd be four tracks. So this doesn't require, insofar as I think I can understand it, David, any variances. It doesn't require that I really come before, a committee to make that decision. But the reason that the other version makes more sense to my mind is that this is actually works on paper because it provides the road frontage, but it doesn't work practically. For instance, tract B, the entrance there is a deep ravine. It's almost impassable. It would not be feasible, really, unless major construction was undertaken to construct a driveway. It also creates other issues because the actual driveway will be where it says 75.2. That's actually an existing driveway that goes into the property right now that I've already developed. You would have to have all these different easements across various tracks in order to open the property up. So there would still, even with this proposal that wouldn't require a variance, there's still going to be only one driveway. And just on paper, it gives what I would almost call lip service to the requirement in this case for the road frontage. So I think the only variance really that would be requested here for this proposal is just that tract A and tract C do not have road frontage, and they are serviced instead by the easement and the shared driveway agreement. So that's the proposal. And I came here before doing much else with it, just to make sure that what I'm asking for here makes sense.
Okay. Ms. Jennings, just for my own clarification, if you could do either one of what he is proposing, from my perspective, it seems like having one curb cut in the road would make the most sense. Am I off base on that kind of thinking?
I would agree with you, especially considering how many access points would be needed for the other design.
Anybody have any questions here on the board of Mr. Russell Chamberlain?
We had a question. We are in dire need of housing in the greater Athens area. In fact, last night, City Council actually discussed legislation to promote construction of new owner-occupied housing, where there's opportunities for people to buy and build equity in houses that they live in. What's your intent on with these various tracts of subdivision? Do you intend to add housing to the area?
Well, certainly for tract, the initial plan was that for tract A and for tract C, that I would sell those as single-family home sites. That's what those sites are going to support. They're going to require septic, so, I mean, there's just going to be limitations to, what can happen there. So those would be individually sold sites, and my intention originally was to use the revenue from that to bring the utilities in, to build the driveway, and to develop the back tract, which is tract B, and then develop a short-term rental business there. 3 to 5 cabins was my original intention. I'm less convinced of that, the viability of that, just for cost reasons right now. But I mean, I certainly can understand maybe there being, a limitation on tract A and tract C, that it would be limited to one single-family home. I'd really rather reserve the option, with tract B, if I did want to develop that into short-term rentals, but it wouldn't be long-term housing. It would be short-term rental business that I would own and manage myself. Does that make sense?
Yep, thank you.
In this proposal, what's happening with the lot on that borders Lavelle?
Good question. Let me see if I can get this thing to. So below tract A,
We can see it down here.
We see
We
it.
see it.
you can see it.
The audience can't see it.
Yeah, there, below tract A, it's approximately 3 acres. It's an already existing parcel. So the one that uses road frontage would use that extra 3 acre with all that additional road frontage to do those long-legged lots, right? In this case, this would just be preserved. It's a challenging site. It was on the market for many years. Nobody ever built on it, or nobody ever bought it. I probably would be inclined to just go ahead and sell it with tract A, and just combine, there we go, just combine what's south of tract A, that 3 acre piece there, just to go with tract A. It would make all the acreage approximately 9 acres that way. So I don't know, I probably would just wait and see what happens with tract A. And if somebody's like, well, I'd love to just get the rest of it, I would probably do that. Could it be sold as a separate parcel? To answer that question, yes, it could be. It already exists as a separate parcel. So what the value of that is probably fairly minimal, just because of issues with the ravine and with putting any kind of septic system in. Yeah. I don't have the topo map up there, I'm sorry, but yeah, there's a lot of hillside there. It's not practical to come off of Lavelle.
Anybody else here? Yes.
I have a question, and I don't know if this is more for Director Riggs or for you, Russell, but, you're just indicating that you conceivably would sell tract A and tract C, moving forward. Is it with a shared use access for this? Is it conceivable for someone to purchase A and then come back to this body or whatever and ask for further lot split of that to subdivide it and use that shared access roadway?
Certainly that's possible, yes. And it wouldn't necessarily come back to this board if it meets the minimum lot split requirements. It could be done in-house, but of course you'd have to have, because these are on septic systems, you'd have to have approval from the health department for that.
Thank you.
Minus 5
in
acres.
fact-
I'm sorry.
Go
I didn't
ahead,
mean
please.
to interrupt. So if they got smaller than 5 acres on that proposed tract A, Yeah, they could put a septic system on there, but that might be a difficult.
It would be
be
up to the
stretched.
health department
Sure.
to approve that. We could not approve that without a health department recommendation. That's
right.
part of our criteria.
Right.
So they do approve, I believe the health department does approve lots smaller than 5 acres for septic systems. But again, that's up to the health department, not up to us.
Sure.
And just to add to that, my intention would be to deed restrict, so it would be part of the deed that tract A, C, and even the one in the back cannot be further subdivided. So that would be kind of part and parcel of this. Also, it would be complicated legally for somebody to come, like, let's say somebody owns tract A and to say, oh, I want to start using this shared driveway easement when it's specifically been designated for the use of, other parties. So that would be a legal challenge from probably anyway. But I would want to have that in the deeds themselves, including the tract in the back. Yeah. So all 3 tracts would be deed restricted, so no further splits could happen. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions here at this point? So we have a number of people here that I'm assuming would like to speak on this matter. I would ask them to come to the podium one at a time, introduce themselves, and present your comments or your thoughts about this. Go ahead. Yeah. So as a part, name and address, I said present yourself, but I want to make it clear, it'll be your name and your current address, so thank you.
Actually, when I signed that, didn't realize I was signing up for a presentation because
You don't have to if you don't want to. I'm just receiving.
Oh, well, I want to talk. So
Okay, that's, you don't have to make a presentation.
I'll kick it off.
Okay.
If that's all right. There's a couple things I'll say just to start. And the first being that,
Ken, would you?
oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
My name is Ken Armstrong. I live on Lavelle Road at 8807. Our property abuts the property we're talking about now for subdivision. It was actually part of a 40-acre farm that my father-in-law bought a long time ago, and exists as a few parcels along Lavelle Road. The seller of the land, my in-laws' children, understood when they were selling it that they were selling it to somebody in Nevada, a single person who might want to put a house up back there. And this all came as quite a surprise just very recently. I don't think anybody on the road had any idea what was being planned here. I'm concerned about it for a number of reasons. One is that, as I understand it, one of the tract, I guess it's tract C, I'm not sure of that.
It's the back
On one of these,
or no, side.
it
right here.
exists really
That's
right
right
next to our property. And because my daughter has a whole variety of health issues, this could present a problem for us. A house that was set back away from where we are wouldn't be a problem as much at any rate. But for being real close, this is something that we have to think about very seriously. I don't know, this is all very new to me. I don't know the rules of the commission or exactly what you can consider or not consider. But that would be what I would say, just to kick it off. If anybody
Thank you, Ken.
has a question for me.
Thank you, Ken.
Hello, my name's Terry Eiler, 8559 Lavelle Road. Been a resident there for about 10 years, and prior to that, I was at 8611 Lavelle Road. resident there for about 40 years. Couple of things. John, could I ask that the letter that I sent you be read into the community,
Into the record.
into the record, so I don't have to repeat that?
Yes, you can, and I'll need to
And-
find it. I thought I
Yeah, there's
brought it.
also one from Corlin Phillips that would like to see read in.
Yes, and Corlin sent his to me, and so all the notes that I've got, I've forwarded it to the commissioners as
Right.
well as our planner and our code official.
Good.
But the one from Corlin came about 2:00 in the morning.
Yes.
And I didn't even get a chance to read it entirely. Now, I will tell you this, Terry, this is a communication, and so this will not be voted on by the board until the next meeting, which will be a week from tomorrow.
Okay.
July 3rd.
I was just trying to save myself
Yes,
repeating the thing.
I will read all those in, okay?
Very good.
I will do that.
The part I do want to repeat is that Lavelle Road is a narrow 1.5 to 1 3/4 width standard road, bad drainage, served by a less than 1 inch inside diameter Leax water run, so that the number of units that you go, water that can go through there is remarkably small. You had to buy a connection when you originally bought the land, and adding more houses to that Leax connection I see as a challenge at best, a problem unfortunately. I'm glad to see that these are 5-acre minimums. They make that area. The septic system up there is delicate, to say the least. The land that Russell's talking about is the highest point in the watershed to Margaret Creek and Factory Creek, which are protected water rights by the county and the ODNR. We own the left-hand run of these maps. So everything along track A and track B to the left is part of 60 acres that my wife and I own, shared with her brother, who has another 60 acres just beyond that. We've been very careful to try to produce that as a tree farm, which is what my father-in-law was building, and now moving it into a conservation area. So I do fear for the drainage into Margaret Creek, Factory Creek. Russell was being generous when he said that there's quite a fall off in that first lot. It's a terrible fall off. But also beside tract A and tract B that comes down into our land, you're looking at 50 to 60 foot fall offs. So this is not as flat and as level as it would appear in the material that's presented here. In general, developing it as single tract homes, single family homes, I think makes a lot of sense. I don't have much argument about that. Developing it as temporary Airbnbs, I think is an interesting business proposition, but perhaps not the best use of this land and this access. Now, the original drawing that he had, that you presented, Russell, the second one that didn't need the variant, I'd love to see that road constructed right down my ownership line. That would be a considerable construction challenge, I think it's safe to say. So I'm not in favor of this.
Thank you. Terry. What's that now?
Can I respond to that last week?
Okay, fine, let's go ahead.
Sorry. The intention, I think, I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear, there would not be a road there. It would be impractical to have a road there. There would still be the same shared driveway that's proposed in the request for the variance. There would,
Sorry, he
yeah,
did make that.
yeah, so just to make sure, so there'd still be one shared driveway, right? We wouldn't go along the property line there. It wouldn't work. Okay, thanks.
Anyone else?
Do you want to speak? You don't? No. Hi, I'm Stevie Waddell. I live at 8889 Lavelle Road currently. It's the second home my husband Bill and I built in our years of marriage on Lavelle Road. All told, I've lived there for 57 years. The Waddell family in general moved there in 1960, so that's another 7 years on top of that Waddells have lived on Lavelle Road. Now, to that point, I've had the opportunity of watching that lovely locale grow. It's a desirable location. A lot of people like that as their private residence. I think the main concern I have with this, and I did have questions that have been answered somewhat. My primary concern is over those years, when we first moved there, we could watch Pearl Love hitch up his team and drive his buckboard from the opposite end of Lavelle Road clear down to White's Mill. That certainly would never be a wise idea today because the traffic has increased considerably. We've gone from fewer than 10 property owners along the road to probably 4 times that number. Consequently, that's increased traffic. Now, in addition to that, the former Waddell location of the former Waddell farm, actually Russell purchased that and built a beautiful new home there and also added a B&B and a lovely studio. So it's functioning, it's a nice addition. Again, my concern is the increase in traffic, and the main reason for that is in all of those years, the road itself has never changed. So we have a lot of not only the residents that live there traveling, but we also have a lot of people that use that as a cross through from 56 to get to 682. So they'll cut through, hit Lurig Road and 682. Many of them drive far too fast. There are blind spots. As Terry has already given you dimensions, the road is not wide. In fact, I would say we've been extremely, extremely fortunate that we have not had a major accident there. And I've just recently, since I've heard of this, I've called and actually spoken with Ted Linska with our township, requesting that they put some large dump rock in the very deep ditches, especially coming up that first hill past the Goodman and Burke and well, past their house, the one that's in the middle of that hill. The road at that point, you're starting up the hill, it begins to take a curve. It's a blind curve. Many people come around that curve very fast. If you're going up the hill, the only way you can get out of the way, you're actually heading right into one of those 3-4 foot deep ditches. So I'm really focused on the road, and I would hope that as you take this into consideration, especially if we're talking about perhaps vacation rental, B&B, which I'm sure would be beautiful, I think we need to take into consideration the access because it's becoming more dangerous as people drive it too quickly. When Route 56 was closed and Lavelle Road became the only access for some people to get to the city, Lavelle Road and Golf Course Road were used. We sat in our yard and at different times we counted no less than 4 semi-tractor trailers traveling Lavelle Road. I wish I'd had a camera. We also saw a huge bus-type RV come out the road. Again, my concern is the road and the access. I know you're concerned about an easement to that road. I would concur with everything that Terry Eiler and some of the others have already offered. I would like for you to take that into consideration. I do have a question that perhaps Russell might answer. I don't know the requirements just for crossing over that gas right away. But since, and I failed to mention, at 8889 Lavelle Road where I reside, my property butts this tract of land as well. So I would be very grateful if it were a single resident, it might be different, but I'm concerned about increase in traffic. We already have a lot of traffic with the existing Airbnb. So I would not be in favor of his request based on that, because I'm concerned for the safety. School buses travel the road as well, so.
Thank you.
I thank you for your time and
Mr.
consideration.
Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
And I don't mean to pose a question to you, ma'am, or to one of the other residents, but just as a general curiosity. You know, this body is only looking at lot splits ultimately. There's no zoning in the county. So, you know, land use is something that you know, is outside the jurisdiction here of the city planning commission. It's purely lot splits. If the township doesn't have the capacity or is unwilling to do road improvements, and LEAX is not have the capacity or is unwilling to create larger utilities, do you think the residents in the area would want to seek annexation in order to achieve some of those goals as far as road improvements and utility improvements?
I can't speak for all of them, but I can say for myself, if this is the kind of progress and building of that area, I don't see that there is any way you could ignore annexing and giving all of those amenities, if you will.
Sure, thank you.
I think the audience may want to speak to that.
Go.
Mr. Chair, and I don't know if Mr. Chamberlain has an answer to this, because the question came up about, you know, putting a road over the gas easement that runs through that. We're managing something similar when it comes to road. We haven't built it yet, but creating a road or roadway on a parcel that we owned at the end of Kenny Drive, where we're putting fire safety, in the future, potentially fire safety facilities, and it is permissible for a road to go over that. You cannot build a permanent structure, obviously, over that type of easement.
That's about right.
Yeah,
If it's a transmission line.
it's transmission.
If it is, I don't.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, my name is Bob Stoll. I and my wife and my son live at 8647 Lavelle Road. And when I first became aware of this project, my concerns were identical to those of Stevie Waddell's. That is, the road itself is, have you guys been on Lavelle Road? Okay, you know it. It's a narrow road with hills, blind spots. It's very dangerous. It is. And the residents who live on that know that, and they drive it appropriately, but strangers usually don't. And they, coming down the hills, they go lickety-split, and we happen to live right in the saddle. Just a few hundred yards from where this road, this development would enter there. And we look both ways and scoot out of the driveway real quick, like to get, you know, from a safety standpoint. But also, one of the things about Lavelle Road is it's a country road, and like many country roads, there's no sidewalks, so people use the road to walk on. Early in the morning, I know about 3 or 4 folks who exercise on the road while it's still dark. So there is safety concerns there that Stevie has said very well, and I just wanted to support what she said, that it's, you know, a definite safety issue from the standpoint of traffic and that kind of stuff on the road.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So far we've had, there's a serious concern about the road width and the quality of the road, I think. There's also concerns about LEAX's ability to support all the residentials there, not considering additional ones. And then there's been some discussion about the septic systems and whether the land, discussion about that. So those are three major issues that I've heard. Are there other issues that people would like to speak to?
Hello, my name is Dylan Armstrong. I live at 8807 Lavelle Road. Our property abuts this property. Please forgive me for being ignorant of what considerations there are for the board. I am not familiar with where exactly your jurisdiction is within all this and what is and is not pertinent. I will try and keep this fairly brief. I have lived on this land for the 35 years that I have been alive, and my great-grandfather's land, which Mr. Chamberlain has recently taken possession of, was a daily part of my life. We maintained it. We maintained husbandry over the land, my father, my mother, and myself. We manicured it, kept it as a green space for the use of the community. We intended to spend our lives on that land, myself included. I intended to live and die on my family's property. What Russell has planned for this land would be extremely detrimental to the health and safety of myself and the community at large. Everyone who has come here to speak today found out about this just a couple of days ago, specifically because I went and told them it was happening. I found out that Russell had taken possession of that land only a few days ago, and I spoke with him about whether or not he intended to sell it, intended to develop on it, etc. It was not a very good conversation, although it was a fairly civil one. The developments that he has planned could directly threaten my health and safety. I suffer from mast cell activation syndrome. I have constant anaphylactic episodes that are largely caused by things that people around me do. Being out in the country is one of the only things that I have that can help me reset my system after being in town and around other people. And if there were to be a development close to my house, someone so much as washing their car on a day with a stiff breeze could put me in the ER or kill me. It's a rather serious condition, though it is a condition that I have some medical management for that has allowed me to return to society, return to school, return to work with the ability to go home and decompress. I have no idea if there's any relevance of any of that to your board, but what I do know has relevance is the fact that ownership of this property is about to be in question. I am retaining an attorney to challenge the validity of the sale that was made by members of my family. There was an understanding within the family that was not honored, and that is about to come to court. I would ask that this commission postpone any decision on this until we finalize that issue. Thank you.
Any other comments from anybody else on this matter? Okay. So as I said before, this is really a communication, and so we will have this on the agenda for the meeting of July 3rd, and at which point the board would be, I would seek from the board a motion to approve or to, and then we would vote on that, and we would decide whether it is approved or is not approved. What I would like to do, if it's okay with folks, is read the emails that I got into the record at the next meeting when we're going to vote, since it's already nearly 1 o'clock, and I would do that. Hopefully we'll have a little bit more time for this matter then, and I can read it into the record so that each of the emails will become part of the record. I will say this, that in large part, the issues that were discussed here are what is mainly in the emails themselves. So it's not like something new would be added at the next meeting. I think these emails are roughly saying the same kind of thing. People have lived there a long time, and they're concerned about the traffic that there are. And I'm a bicycler. I've ridden my bike up that road. It is narrow and it is challenging, and it is a problem to some degree. So, but that would be that's the strategy here in my mind, that this will be on the agenda for the next meeting. You're welcome to come. I would ask that if anybody comes and they want to speak, that they focus on new things, but I will read these documents into the record, so, at that point in time. Any other thoughts here?
Just to add, that
Okay.
I appreciate that, just know that the chair has forwarded those emails from all of you on to the other board members, so in virtue of doing so, it's created a public record. But to have them read into record at the next meeting is appropriate. But again, know that if anyone were to reach out to me or anybody else on this commission and say, I would like to see that record, by law, we have to disclose that record because you have created a public record.
Yes, Dylan.
There is one last thing I would like to add. Should possession of this land come to me legally, I intend to join with the Scotts and Eilers in making this conservation land so that we have it as green space in an ever-developing community, a space that everyone in the community has recreational use of and may continue to enjoy for future generations. That is my intent.
Thank you. Thank you. I have one question with regard to that. Does this property abut the Good Works property back on? It does on. Okay. Excuse me. Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Well, again, thank you all for coming and expressing your concerns. I truly appreciate that, and it's good food for us to think about. This waiting until next Wednesday gives people an opportunity on the board here to visit the area and take a look at it, and maybe make themselves more comfortable with where they cast their vote. So thanks so much. The next item is to talk about the Stimson Avenue overlay, get an update, for the commission to get an update on that by Ms. Jennings, our city planner.
Yes, I believe Commission Member Nisley had reached out and asked for kind of a general informational presentation on overlay zones in general and how they work, especially with the underlying zoning districts. So that's kind of what I've structured this presentation around. And I kept it brief because I knew this meeting would run fairly long. So overlay zones are a zoning district which establishes more strict or additional standards in order to meet specific community goals. Often overlay zones are tailored for specific areas and can cover multiple properties and also multiple underlying zoning districts, so they can cross all sorts of boundaries. They interact with underlying zoning. The underlying zoning itself is still valid, and overlay zones do not change the underlying permitted uses that are already permitted in those underlying zones. So it wouldn't change or allow for an additional type of land use that is permitted in that underlying zone, like the R1 or the B1 zones. Also, overlay zones work with the underlying zones in order to create those more specific and stricter standards than what is elsewise permitted in the code. So they set kind of higher standards for a specific area in order to meet certain goals. Why even use overlay zones? They can help communities specifically meet stated goals, like in particular the Stimson Avenue corridor plan is calling for an overlay zone in order to kind of focus redevelopment efforts along the Stimson Avenue corridor. Communities often use overlay zones to protect special features such as historic buildings, even wetlands, steep slopes, and waterfronts. And they can also be used to promote specific development projects such as mixed-use developments, waterfront developments, housing along transit corridors, and even affordable housing. Athens has 2 existing overlay zones. First, the wellhead protection area is technically an overlay zone, and it establishes additional regulations for protecting our drinking water in the area surrounding all of the wells, and it is quite a large area. We also have historic districts, which are technically an overlay zone, and these protect and preserve historic sites and encourage compatible changes with our historic image. I just wanted to give those as examples of what we already have here in Athens. And why this is kind of coming up and relevant to the Planning Commission, we've called out that the Stimson Avenue Corridor Plan, the plan itself calls for an overlay zone, and the Planning Commission has identified that overlay zone, establishing it as a goal for this year. And so this overlay zone, the plan itself listed several goals for that overlay zone to achieve, including creating opportunities for placemaking, promoting pedestrian-oriented development, similar to what you see here in this photo and our rework of the right-of-way there. Also, we're looking at floodplain mitigation issues that have been common along this corridor, and then also looking at potentially adopting parking maximums in order to further promote that pedestrian activity along the corridor. In the Stimson Avenue Corridor Plan itself, it established the boundary map that you see here on the screen, and this may change for the overlay zone. We'll establish those exact boundaries with our consultant, American Structure Point, once that plan gets on the books. We will, in the process of establishing this overlay zone, engage the public and seek input and guidance for what needs to be included in that overlay zone. And then American Structure Point will work on creating that language, the code language that we can then adopt. And then also they will be there to help represent the overlay zone at city meetings, including Planning Commission and also the council meetings. That's all I had for right now. Our process, we're still working out the contract with American Structure Point, but we have had recent meetings with them about beginning that process. And we've got them pulled in with our Appalachian Community Grant Program funding as well. And so we've got kind of ongoing conversations with them about that project. Does any of the commission members have questions specifically about overlay zones?
Well, did you have some, Andy?
I do have a
Go ahead,
question.
Mr. Stone.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Jennings. Can you describe, the overlay zone reportedly would put stricter standards in a particular area on top of the underlying zoning. Traditionally, we think of stricter standards as something that limits the flexibility of the underlying property owner and potentially limits the value then of the property. Can you think of a situation where that would be reversed, where a stricter standard would actually increase the property of the underlying, or increase the value of the underlying property?
One example that comes to mind right now is the brief mention of the parking maximums, especially along Stimson Avenue, where we have fairly narrow property depths. For commercial development, pushing those structures up to the right-of-way and increasing that pedestrian-oriented type development and putting the parking in the back and reducing how much you provide does actually create a healthier network, since it is plugged in, the corridor itself is plugged into the Near East Side neighborhood and also the students closer to campus. So looking at those parking maximums actually creates a healthier community there, because you can build a larger building, one, because you don't have to take up your lot with parking, and then two, it just creates an environment that is more enticing and healthier for pedestrians that live in the area. Another standard that I know that the Stimson Avenue Corridor Plan called out, we're looking at architectural designs, and I know that those are usually a little intimidating but to developers, but we would be sure to make sure that they are approachable and manageable and not going to be a financial burden, because we do want to incentivize development along that corridor.
And if I could ask a follow-on, sir. And so to that point about the architectural standards, you could ultimately end up having a situation where you, because you are putting that standard in place, that you couldn't have a property next door that, for lack of a better technical term, looked like crap because there was an architectural standard, so it could increase your property value.
It could, yes. And if there was an existing property, of course, if they were to do improvements, they would be required to meet those new standards. But if they do not make improvements to their exterior, they wouldn't be required to meet the new standards.
Okay.
General question, and I'm still learning about code, but my thought too would be, could an overlay zone also do things about lighting, noise, so that if we allow it to be more flexible in terms of we want a mix of housing, but we also want businesses, so that a person who's in a residence or maybe a duplex or a townhouse would know, oh, if the cottage market is going to go in next door, they're not going to blast on outdoor speakers overnight, sound all the time like we get at Speedway on East State.
Yeah, I
So
think,
that kind of thing.
yeah, that would be a part of kind of the stricter standards. We could incorporate lighting and noise into that overlay zone.
Downward lighting and not the neon signs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
addition to our existing standards relating to light and noise. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks.
So, is what is being proposed, are there any zoning changes that are being proposed as a part of this? Where properties are as a part of the overlay, are not a B3 or what, are we changing any of the zoning or just overlaying other type restrictions like architectural standards or parking or whatever?
Currently, zone changes are not being proposed, but I think that the underlying zoning would be assessed during the overlay zone creation. I know that the Stimson Avenue corridor plan does call out for future zone changes along the corridor and looking at maximizing mixed uses there, especially with the commercial and residential above. I know that those have been in the conversation, but there are not current plans or proposals to change the zoning at this time.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Is there any comments or questions from the audience? Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Peter Katsas, and I reside at 1 Bryan Road. But I'm specifically here because I own 2 and 4 West Stimson and also 2 Cornwall. And so, and just for clarification, I mean, this is the document that we're talking about. This is the one that, and I think I have the original draft. I don't know where this is currently at. I don't know if there's additional, has there been updates or, I mean, this is just the first one.
If that's from the fall, that would be the most recent one.
Okay, all right. And so, I think the thing for me is I worry about the health of the future businesses that are going to be on this, in this area. I had heard at some point we might be changing from a B3 to a B1. It sounds like that's not necessarily on the table right now. Is that correct? I mean, that's not, there's no active plans. And so American Structure Point is being hired in again to do additional work above and beyond this one. So the last couple of years I have worked in this medium, kind of developing some of these plans for communities and working with companies that, sometimes are only 2 or 3 people and sometimes they're national organizations that have, offices all over the US. Usually when you have a document like this, a planning document, there'll be like a thank you section of all the people that they've engaged with. And this one doesn't have anything like that. For us, we're still, property owners that are on the street are still kind of surprised that we haven't had that engagement. It sounds like it's coming, but up until this point, there's a wealth of information I feel like has been missed. And so now we're working with this, and I don't even feel like it really has the essence or understanding of how this street has functioned to this point. The thing that I worry about the most when we're talking about this is losing some of the lot configurations. I know that they were talking about, well, you started talking about moving that parking to the back, and I think, what was it? If you folks, because you can see I've marked this thing up like crazy. What page is it? Oh, page 107. They kind of talk about the commercial zone. Is that right? Let me just double check just to make sure. And they specifically say that there's no parking in front. And this is, of course, I was going on a B1 type configuration where you have like a 25-foot setback for the building, which I could see something that you might be trying to achieve in that, you know, in that narrow corridor that you want to push some of the buildings back. But also in a B1, you have no side setbacks. So people are going to build to the size that they can. You're going to have additional costs because the footprint of the building is larger. You have more lot coverage, which, you know, you're going to have to worry about runoff and things like that. Some of the stuff that the university person was talking about with his dorm system that he's putting in down on South Green. But the other thing is, I know at one point we were talking about this, you know, there might be looking at buffers between the north side of the street and the east side of that Near East Side neighborhood. And I know that there was some discussion about limiting building height there in order to provide a buffer. But at the same time, what we're going to find is that if all the parking is pushed to the back and you have no egress because people are building to their property lines, your back alleys, specifically the one between Grant and Cornwell, is now going to be it's going to be the ingress and the egress for all those buildings, which at this point is pretty quiet back alley that some of the garages back up onto and things like that. So I think that the public does need to know what, you know, what's being sold and what will actually be achieved is really key and critical, you know, kind of in this conversation. For me, having a B3, it's imperative and it's a game changer. I originally started a business at 14 West Stimson, which is a good laundromat building. So we were set back at least 25 feet from the drive from Stimson Avenue. In 2011, when we moved four parcels down to 4 West Stimson, we came up right onto the street, and our sales that year increased 17%, which is kind of unheard of for a business that had already been in business for 13 years. Very uncommon, you know, usually you only find like 5-6% growth if you're lucky, you know, in those kind of retail operations in a business of that age. But that year we spent a lot of time telling people, no, we were not a new business. You know, we had been on the street already for 10 years, but they just hadn't noticed us because it was a parking lot. So if businesses are pushed back 25 feet from the street, it doesn't really give them a better shot. And, you know, the idea that I know that there also has been some discussion about maybe on the opposite side of the street, the south side, changing to that where you wouldn't have a commercial requirement, which I'm fine with. But if you're having the street and saying that commercial doesn't need to be on one side, you know, businesses need more business in order to do more business. And you already have some great anchors that are current and I believe will always be there. You know, you have the Hocking Valley Bank, you have the post office, you have things that people need to do on that street. And so there's opportunities to, you know, have other businesses that will pick up on that traffic, but we're only going to have 50% of the street maybe trying to pick up those businesses. So it really kind of depends on what people are thinking and what the goal is. I know that it's a do they use the term recreation district or entertainment district? Is that kind of what they're, and maybe that's more up here at the Armory and on Carpenter. I don't know how this is all being split up, but I mean, I look at you know, currently right now, we have a Family Dollar that is, you know, next to the Armory. And we could have discussions all day about what those stores are, you know, are doing and selling and everything else, but, you know, as a community member that lives, you know, behind that, I use it. And if that was replaced, if, in this plan, they talk about replacing it maybe with some sort of event center or stage or something like that, well, maybe that's all well and good, but I don't know how that really helps the neighborhoods, you know, that might have access to, you know, a place where they can grab something, you know, on a daily or weekly basis or something like that, whereas, you know, to have a concert venue. So these are my concerns. I'd say that currently the engagement that I've seen so far hasn't been great. I mean, you look at the pie charts of the people that engaged on this project, on page 33. Excuse me for 1 second, but I mean, there it is. And you have this little pie chart right here, and I mean, you had 5 business owners, 5 developers, 5 property owners, 8 real estate professionals. I don't know if there's a list or notes or, you know, who attended these meetings and what they talked about, but I mean, for me, myself as a property owner, I would love to know what this brain trust of real estate developers have to say about, you know, about the property. And it's just, I just kind of see missed opportunities, you know, to date. So, and if anybody has any comments.
Well, the only thing I have to say, Peter, is that this will come for public, to the public to address. I don't know, maybe Megan or somebody could speak to what structure points will be doing next. Will they be engaging more people? What's the strategy from here forward at this point?
I believe public input and would be one of the first steps once we kind of establish our management team, I guess you could say, and then we would reach out to the public and schedule some meetings to talk about what they would like to see along that corridor. In the corridor plan itself that you covered, what they were talking about were kind of like high-level dream scenarios for what this overlay zone could potentially accomplish. And so actually getting down and working on the overlay zone will, especially with the additional input, will not exactly be word for word what's included in that plan, and it'll be more finely tailored for the overlay zone and what the public wants along that corridor. One comment I'd like to make about your concerns about the parking back behind the buildings. Individual access to the required parking for an individual business. If there's not a cross-access agreement between neighboring property owners, an individual access would have to be provided. So if you couldn't build to your property line and have your parking isolated in the back without having agreement from your neighboring property owners to access your required parking through their property. So they would have to provide individual drive aisles to their own required parking in the back. So I just wanted to address that kind of concern up front. But the first step would be engaging the public and setting a tone for how this overlay zone needs to be structured. And then the consultant would move forward with actually drafting the language, and we would be reviewing that draft, I'm sure, and continuing on with that process of adoption.
Okay, you know, and I did some research with American Structure Point. I mean, it seems like they're a large engineering firm. You know, they've added planning, I guess, to some degree, but I mean, you can't even get a name or an email or anything off of their website. I mean, you know, and I guess the thing is that, you know, you have property owners, you have business owners that have been in this town for a long time and have invested lots of time and money into this process. And to date, we don't have any idea what's going on, you know, and so it's, you know, if you wanted to instill fear into a group of people that feel like they've done a lot for the community already to date, you know, that's kind of, that's where we're at. You know, we don't know what's going on, and I think that I really wish that there would be some more outreach, you know, at the beginning. I would love to have seen more people present for this, but maybe that would have slowed the process, and I don't know. I don't know why we've gotten to this point and not necessarily been engaged to try to draw out what we understand about the corridor, because we've spent, you know, decades on this corridor.
I apologize, I started in my position in February, so I'm not sure what that public engagement process was
Yeah,
for
and
the
I'm
corridor
not,
plan.
and it's not you, you're the only one that's answering the questions, so that's, I mean, I'm not calling you out, it's, you know, it's administration and, you know, in general, just to be like, okay, you know, and I understand everybody gets stuck in their silos, you know, because you've got a whole city to run and everything else, but, you know, at the same time, you know, I thought the whole idea was building community, you know, and I haven't seen it yet, so that's all. Thank you.
Sure. And thanks for taking the time and for waiting to present some of your information. You've obviously spent a lot of time with it. And I think just a comment that this is at the preliminary stage, is that correct? Now, we have engaged with these people before, and we are considering continuing the contract, but it has been one of my questions, yes, number of people that were actually contacted, number of businesses that were contacted, what's our timeline? And then I think for me, the more transparent we can be about the process and those opportunities that are going to be focus groups, things like that, with different groups of people, business owners. We have a whole community of people living in an apartment complex directly across the street from Family Dollar that I don't know where they go or how they get there to shop or something like that. I realize you're not saying it's going away, but how do we be inclusive about that and the ever-present need for a lot of different varieties of housing that we've got a strong need for. So, thank you.
And I just want to mention, I mean, I've spent some time going up and down the street just talking to other, you know, property owners and business owners and stuff like that, and I've yet to find someone who participated in this. I know they must be out there somewhere, but at least through my network, which I've been here 50 years. I mean, 50 some years. I don't really want to tell you how many 50 years, but haven't found them yet.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else would like to say
something? Kim Kelly, I live out on Baker Road in Albany. I do own 7 parcels on the north side of Stimson Avenue, and if Peter Costas hadn't called me about this, I would never have known that this was coming up. And you know, I'm just a little appalled that the city is bringing in this large engineering firm to structure our society and not include some of the local people. You know, we know our community. We need to, as community members, we need to be the ones to make these decisions on what we're going to have on Stimson Avenue, not recommendations from a large firm that knows nothing about our community. And one of my properties is the newest building on Stimson Avenue. It sits perpendicular to the street because of the current zones and regulations and the setbacks, and I wanted to put the building parallel to the street, and with everything, it was just easier to turn it sideways. I didn't need any approval from the city, and that's what your codes currently look like. That's what I look at the building and say, this is what your codes are on that street. So if I want to put another business on there, I have to turn it perpendicular to the street. And, you know, that's just not what I really originally wanted to do. But so it would be nice if you would work with some of the people who have businesses and properties on there to make it the best way possible and not put more restrictions on zoning. And like I said, I have the only vacant lot on Stimson Avenue that I would like to develop someday, but I'm holding off because I don't know what's going to happen. And I've got a house down there, in a couple of years or sooner, I'm going to tear down. It's easier for me to have a vacant lot on that street than a business or a rental on that street. And so I'll just tear it down. And like I said, my family's been in this community since the day Athens was created. I'm part of the first families in Athens. My grandfather was president of city council in the 50s. I've been around. We've been business people. We had Law Ed Press. We had one of the biggest employers in the county at the time. And so I really would appreciate if somebody would work with us on this. You know?
I do think the city wants to do that, and maybe
I would
they've
appreciate
fallen short at this point, but I think that as we proceed, things, I mean, the city wants to do that property to develop, and it's
I do
a
too.
main entrance to the community, and I think people would, I believe the city wants that to be attractive and inviting and encourage engagement and community there.
Well, I would be happy to work with the city, if,
Okay.
you know, if they reach out to us, you know, just communicate with us.
Mayor?
And we would like that as well. What you have before you is a preliminary design. That's all it is. And as was indicated, and Mr. Casas, you pointed out, you know, this entertainment center, it was just an idea. That's all it was. It was just an idea. Because if you look closely in there, it also speaks to having Bird Arena move over onto the green space, you know, because knowing full well that, you know, Ohio University is only going to invest so much more money into Bird Arena, and at some point, we may lose the only skating rink within a 70-mile radius of the city of Athens.
Maybe that would be a good business for somebody to open.
Pardon me?
I said maybe that would be a good business for
It would be
somebody to
wonderful,
open.
and I agree with you 100%. 100%
You know.
I agree with you, and that was kind of the concept too, that this could be a public-private partnership of some type, and maybe even to include a bowling alley. But these are just lofty, you know, to what we could do. So it's a preliminary design. As we continue to move forward, we have not signed a contractual continuance with American Structure Point. But once we do, the next step is to have, first and foremost, public engagement and business engagement. And, you know, since both of you are here today, you know, we will certainly reach back around, and not just the two of you, but any address up and down the Stimson Avenue corridor, because I believe it's vitally important for your input as to how this all unfolds in the future. We've invested $7.2 million into the Stimson Avenue corridor, you know, with the hopes of creating what I would contend to be probably one of the more hallmark gateways into the city of Athens, especially with the improvements that we've made to the Stimson Avenue corridor. And given that, you know, we want to make sure that all of you have input as to how we continue to improve that corridor as we're moving forward in time. So we will absolutely do that. I think that's a great starting point. To hear your voices today as we move forward in time, your voices will continue to be heard, and your thoughts and ideas as to how we can make this truly an improvement for the entire city. But those
Well, that's
of you,
what we want. We want the best for the city. We know that's a main access to the city.
Sure.
So, you know, just please include, we want to help. Please include us in this design. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you, Megan. I was remiss. I mean, that's what started the whole conversation. And thank you for presenting the overlay. That was very helpful, I think, just for a broad background on where we go in next steps.
Everybody had their say that wanted to say something at this point? Oh, no.
And this is just a story that I have that in another community that I'm familiar with over in West Virginia. There was a time that, and this is going to sound like some kind of space age thing or something, but Richard Branson, Virgin Atlantic and all that, he decided they were going to do some of their testing for, what's the underground, those tubes with the hyperlink, the hyperloops. So you've heard of this type of technology. So they were going to develop this in an area that was abandoned mine land area. And some group at WVU went through and they drew all these maps and all these plans of like cities and towns that didn't exist anywhere on the map, and they had like they had like a big Lake Justice for Jim Justice. They had, it was just off the charts. They had Amazon shipping centers and all these museums and things like that that little town, that little community of 800 people, as soon as those maps got leaked, it just blew up. I mean, it was just, you couldn't go through town without having somebody just, everybody's heart rate and, blood pressure was like through the roof. And so it's like, this kind of stuff, I understand that we're starting right now, but it just needs to be known that part of this process, there needs to be talk about this a lot more, a lot sooner in order for this to really feel like that it's being done correctly. So that's all I have to say.
Well, I promise you, we're not building any hyperloops, and we're not gonna build a gondola from the parking garage to Long Hill.
They're not even doing that in West Virginia anymore, so,
Thank you. Thank you. So, we've gone a long time. I'm going to suggest that any reports, unless there's something critical that we need to hear from you folks on, that we forego the reports at this meeting, and we move on. Is there any announcements at all that need to be made here at this point? Okay. Yes, please do.
So there's a deadline this Friday at the state. There's a grant program called Welcome Home Ohio. And the city of Athens will be submitting an application for that. And the point of that program is to establish funding that the city can use to develop affordable housing. Now, the properties that we have kind of initially identified are all zoned R1, and in order to get affordable and smaller units that meet the state's requirements, we will have to go through a PUD zoning process. So I just wanted to give the Planning Commission a heads up that that type of project will be coming to you all in a couple months. So just a heads up.
That's good news.
Thank you. So with that said, our next meeting will be July 3rd. And so I thank everybody for attending, and I